Friday, September 22, 2017, at Liverpool Crown Court, the hallways fell silent as 19 defendants awaited their verdicts. For 6 years, they had saturated towns and cities throughout Britain with illegal narcotics and had ridiculed law enforcement during traffic stops, recording them on camera, hurling insults, believing themselves beyond the reach of justice. However, this wasn't the sole case targeting Liverpool's criminal underworld. 4 years prior, on October 15, 2013, Dutch authorities had breached the entrance of a modest cafe in Rotterdam. Beyond the secured entrance, investigators discovered a venue where international cocaine trafficking schemes were discreetly orchestrated. Several individuals present that day managed to escape and remained fugitives for years. One concealed himself in various European locations, while another disappeared into Dubai's underworld. These represent two distinct narratives, yet combined, they demonstrate how Liverpool's criminal organizations functioned on both domestic and international levels, and how law enforcement remained determined to dismantle both operations. Between 2010 and 2016, a trafficking network based in Anfield, Liverpool, constructed an operation that would extend nationwide. 3 individuals became particularly known to investigators: Edward Murphy, Jamie Jarvis, and Stephen Harrison. They weren't subtle tacticians or discreet operatives. Their approach was audacious, brutal, and transparent to anyone residing nearby. Nevertheless, for 6 years they controlled the trade. From their Anfield headquarters, their distribution channels penetrated deep into other UK regions. Lancashire, Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, Devon, and Cornwall all experienced their influence. What started as a regional operation eventually evolved into a structure that would later be identified nationally as county lines. The organization's influence was maintained through consistent supplies of extremely pure cocaine and heroin. Their source was Francis Fenn, who could deliver product with purity levels reaching 88%. After being diluted, it transformed into inexpensive street transactions that could rapidly saturate an area. This formed the basis of their authority. Establish presence quickly, overwhelm existing demand, and achieve dominance before smaller competitors could mount resistance. However, their control wasn't established solely through supply. Violence remained constant. The 3 leaders were notorious for intimidation and ensuring rivals were either eliminated or suppressed. For local communities, the abrupt influx was unmistakable. Previously peaceful streets now featured unfamiliar individuals. For 6 years, Murphy, Jarvis, and Harrison were convinced they had identified and exploited a market opportunity. The truth was, they had pioneered a merciless expansion strategy, one that would define the county lines emergency throughout Britain. Supporting the organization's expansion was a strategy that became characteristic of county lines: exploitation. The leadership rarely appeared in the towns where they conducted their trade. Instead, they depended on vulnerable individuals, addicts, adolescents, and children barely mature enough to comprehend what they were being manipulated into. One technique they employed was called cuckooing. It was straightforward and ruthless. A vulnerable addict, frequently living independently, would be approached and given complimentary drugs in return for accommodation. Once inside, the organization's dealers would commandeer the residence. Within days, it ceased being the addict's home. It became an operational center, a location where products could be stored, processed, and distributed. The addict remained trapped, exploited as a host, and compensated with barely enough heroin or crack to maintain the arrangement. From these residences, the network expanded further. Dealers could enter a new town and almost immediately establish a presence that proved difficult to remove. However, it wasn't only addicts. Teenagers, some younger than 16, were recruited into the operation. Their youth made them less suspicious to authorities, and their vulnerability rendered them easy to manipulate. One case was particularly notable. In Darwen, Lancashire, one teenager became a striking illustration of how vulnerable children were drawn into the organization's world and how rapidly they could become targets. He had been recruited to transport drugs, traveling repeatedly between Liverpool and surrounding towns. His age meant he attracted less attention, but it also left him dangerously vulnerable. Eventually, rumors began circulating. Other members suspected he had communicated with police. One senior member turned against him, initiating a terrifying pursuit through Darwin streets. Residents later described the scene as chaotic, the boy fleeing for his life, chased by men intent on punishing what they perceived as betrayal. In panic, he managed to reach a hotel, rushing inside to escape. Meanwhile, he placed a desperate phone call begging for assistance. On the line, his voice trembled as he explained that a group waited outside. He feared being stabbed if he emerged. His words provided police with a disturbing glimpse into the pressure these children endured. Exploitation wasn't an incidental consequence of the organization's business model. It was fundamental to it, and all of it served to protect a network that prospered on others' suffering. For Edward Murphy and his inner circle, the profits from their trade were displayed openly. While their dealers worked the streets, Murphy drove through Liverpool in a brand new Range Rover that cost the organization £6,000 monthly to lease. It was a statement vehicle valued at over £100,000, impossible to overlook in the neighborhoods where he resided. Days after obtaining his driving license, he was observed driving an Audi worth £40,000, another demonstration of how rapidly drug proceeds transformed into status symbols. The ostentation wasn't confined to vehicles. Rolex watches decorated the wrists of key members, each one regarded as a badge of success. Designer clothing, expensive accommodations, champagne bottles opened in nightclubs. It all served the identical purpose: to project prosperity, to demonstrate to the world that they were untouchable. During social gatherings, the organization would order magnums of champagne, flowing freely while associates recorded on their mobile phones. However, Murphy extravagance extended to peculiar areas as well. He possessed a fascination with fireworks. Police who conducted raids later discovered hundreds of them stockpiled, sufficient to create city-scale displays. He was known to detonate them from rooftops in central Liverpool, bursts of color above the skyline, financed entirely by drug profits. To him, it was a spectacular method of flaunting power publicly. Yet for those residing alongside the organization, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. Behind the Rolexes and champagne, the reality was fear. Violence became a recurring feature, reminders of consequences when territory was challenged. Intimidation spilled from back alleys into daily life. Even police officers faced open hostility. We will discuss this shortly. For Murphy and his crew, money arrived rapidly and was spent just as quickly. There was no laundering, no attempt to disguise the profits. Every penny was flaunted. By 2015, the organization's arrogance was impossible to ignore. Concealing in the shadows was never their approach. Body-worn cameras soon documented just how audacious they had become. During one routine stop, Edward Murphy, John Mangan, and William Summerall were intercepted by police. Rather than complying, they transformed the moment into a spectacle. They retrieved their phones and began recording. The men encircled the officer and shouted abuse, calling him a rat and a fat mutt. Their voices echoed across the street, drawing spectators as if publicly humiliating the police could somehow position them above the law. Murphy barked at the officer to return to his vehicle. Summerall refused commands to remain stationary, pacing aggressively, shouting over every attempted explanation. The tactic was deliberate: record the confrontation, drown it in abuse and project dominance. For them, it was performance. For the officer, it was another reminder of how brazen these individuals had become. However, the most dangerous confrontation occurred in February 2016. Police moved against Summerall, who had been concealing drugs and weapons in an abandoned club building on Townsend Lane. As officers surrounded the property, Summerall scrambled onto the roof in a desperate attempt to evade arrest. From the street, a makeshift incendiary device was thrown at police. 4 officers were caught in the flames. Their uniforms and equipment caught fire. It was no longer about drugs. It was open aggression, a direct challenge to law enforcement. For detectives, these confrontations proved what residents already knew. The organization's arrogance and their attempts to intimidate even uniformed officers made them a serious threat. Each insult, each rooftop escape, each assault on police contributed to the accumulating case against them. By 2016 to 2017, Merseyside police had already compiled a substantial dossier on the Anfield organization through extensive detective work. Teams had followed vehicles late into the evening, documented addresses visited by suspected couriers, and quietly observed patterns of behavior along motorways. Every journey, every exchange, every late-night visitor was recorded and compiled. Storage houses were identified. Detectives noted patterns of movement. Individuals arriving with packages, staying briefly, and departing with new ones. Surveillance units discreetly monitored houses and apartments in Merseyside and across Lancashire, recording vehicles arriving at unusual hours, occupants carrying luggage or bags, and men switching vehicles at service stations to avoid detection. Mobile phone data, call logs, cell site records provided connections between suspects and locations. Financial records, cash deposits, money flow, and expenditure were scrutinized to trace profits back to key players. When detectives were satisfied the network was mapped, they coordinated with the Crown Prosecution Service to secure warrants. On coordinated dates, simultaneous raids struck across Merseyside and in outlying towns. Search teams entered properties, searching for concrete evidence. In one raid, officers discovered large sums of cash concealed in drawers and suitcases, proceeds ready to be laundered. Another seized cutting agents, mixing powders used to dilute pure cocaine into street-grade products. In an apartment, investigators uncovered scales covered with residue alongside notebooks displaying names, debts, addresses, and transaction amounts. These tick lists confirmed what detectives had long suspected about how money and drugs circulated. Weapons were also collected: knives, blunt instruments, and in some cases, imitation firearms used for intimidation. Phones and SIM cards were seized and forensically imaged. Analysts extracted call records and messaging metadata, linking suspects to each other and to specific supply runs. Each raid dismantled the infrastructure. Safe houses were shut down, stockpiles destroyed, routes interrupted. After a full year of surveillance and enforcement coordination, the physical backbone of the organization's operation was dismantled. What had once seemed untouchable became a series of shuttered addresses, seized evidence, and prosecution-ready files. The path to court was now clear. By September 2017, the work of Operation Scarava reached its conclusion inside Liverpool Crown Court. 19 men were finally brought before a judge. The evidence against them was overwhelming. At the top of the network, the sentences were clear and consistent. Edward Murphy, identified as a central figure, was handed 11 years and 4 months. The same term was given to Jamie Jarvis and Stephen Harrison, both described as senior organizers in the conspiracy. The supplier, Francis Fenn, was also jailed for 11 years and 4 months. John Mangan, captured on body-worn cameras abusing officers, was sentenced to 8 years and 8 months. William Summerall received 7 years and 8 months. Others who played key roles in moving and distributing the drugs were dealt with firmly. Jamie Gray and Mark Fear were each sentenced to 6 years and 8 months, as were Walter Corrin, Liam Dickinson, and James Tyrrell. Stephen Gandy and Louis Aspinwall were both jailed for 6 years alongside Francis Usher, who received the same. Lower-level couriers and facilitators were also punished. Eddie Hamilton and Ricky Doran received 5 years each. Abby Gill was jailed for 4 years and 9 months while Kalam Arat received 4 years. Ataf Ali was given 6 years for his role. 2 teenagers, both just 16 when arrested, were dealt with differently. One received a 12-month referral order, the other a youth rehabilitation order with a curfew. Even here, the court made clear age did not excuse their involvement. Together, the 19 men were sentenced to a combined total of more than 135 years. In October 2013, Dutch police moved against a small bar in Rotterdam, known as Café de Ital. To passers-by, it looked like an ordinary neighborhood pub. In reality, it was a controlled access hub for Europe's most serious drug traffickers. Entry was via buzzer system, admitting only trusted faces. Officers' findings confirmed long-held suspicions. Behind the cafe's doors lay a meeting point for international suppliers and European buyers. Inside, they recovered handguns, radio scanners, and a cash-counting machine tools of an operation far beyond casual smuggling. This was cartel business, negotiating routes, financing, and cocaine shipments for Britain. Rotterdam's port, one of Europe's busiest, served as the gateway. The raid spotlighted 2 Liverpool men, Michael Maughan and Robert Gerrard. Intelligence tied them directly to the cafe and its conspiracies. Detectives believed they used it to forge ties with South American cartels, haggle prices, and arrange multi-million-pound consignments. Plans at Café de Ital were vast. commercial-scale trafficking with hundreds of kilos. Mon told contacts consignments could hide in legitimate cargo, like Argentinian meat imports. The method was simple yet effective. Stash cocaine in everyday trade, slip through the port's chaos, and extract post-inspection. Prosecutors valued the conspiracy at least £60 million. Its danger stemmed from financial muscle, hundreds of thousands of euros in cash for outright purchases, minimizing supplier risk and ensuring repeat shipments. Corruption via port staff bribes and secrecy through encrypted PGP devices and specialist handsets masked logistics in mundane messages. To outsiders, talks seemed normal. To insiders, they detailed global shipments. For the National Crime Agency and Dutch partners, the café proved cross-border crime. South American cartels feeding Europe via Rotterdam, with Liverpool traffickers like Mon and Gerard funneling drugs to the UK. When police stormed in October 2013, several were arrested on site. Others escaped, including Gerard and Mon. Both vanished within days. Gerard, early 50s and police familiar, fled to mainland Europe facing grave charges for negotiating million-pound cocaine deals. His name and photograph quickly featured in Operation Captura and Operation Return, high-profile most wanted campaigns by the National Crime Agency and Crime Stoppers aimed at fugitives hiding abroad. Mon, from Croxteth in Liverpool, was in his 30s when he went underground. Detectives said he was closely tied to the Rotterdam plot and was wanted for conspiracy to import cocaine. For years, his name remained on the NCA's list of most wanted fugitives. Intelligence placed him in the Netherlands using false identities. Each NCA appeal named him alongside Gerard, emphasizing their central role between UK buyers and South American suppliers. For Gerard, the pressure became unbearable. In October 2016, 3 years after the Rotterdam raid, his solicitor arranged for him to surrender at Manchester's Central Park police station. He told officers that life as a fugitive had become unbearable. He was charged with conspiracy to import cocaine, pleaded guilty within months, and by 2017 was sentenced to 14 years in prison. Mon, however, remained hidden. While his associate served time, he stayed one of Liverpool's most wanted men, a fugitive with direct ties to an international cartel pipeline. His absence kept the case alive, his name lingering in headlines long after the café raid faded. Tracking Michael Mon was never simple. With fake passports and aliases, he crossed borders and hid using criminal contacts in Europe. He surfaced in the Netherlands near old networks, then traces led to Dubai, a trafficker's safe haven, where money flowed freely and identities were easy to forge. From there, he bounced between Middle Eastern and European countries, never staying put. The National Crime Agency, with Dutch help, kept the heat on through international campaigns and surveillance tracking finances, associates, and travel. Mon's decade on the run highlighted his resources, but each year added pressure. Gerard had surrendered. For Mon, the walls were closing in. Wherever he went, Amsterdam, Dubai, or beyond, law enforcement trailed close. By 2021, Michael Mon had been a fugitive for almost 8 years. Leads pointed to Dubai, where investigators believed he had been moving between properties under false identities. That year, the breakthrough came. Working with Dubai police, the NCA tracked Mon's movements and coordinated a plan to apprehend him. In April 2021, officers in Dubai arrested him. The capture marked the end of nearly a decade in hiding and removed one of the last men still wanted over the Café d'Étal conspiracy. For law enforcement, the arrest in Dubai was not just about one man. It was proof that fugitives, no matter how far they ran, could still be found. What followed was a complex process of extradition. Mon was held in custody in the United Arab Emirates, while arrangements were made to return him to Britain. Under the supervision of NCA officers, he was flown back to the UK to face trial. For detectives who had pursued him since 2013, it was the conclusion of one of their longest manhunts. In 2023, Michael Mon finally stood in the dock at Manchester Crown Court. Confronted with the evidence from the Café d'Étal investigation, he admitted conspiring to import Class A drugs. The prosecution outlined how he had been central to the plan and the use of encrypted phones to shield his movements. When the sentence was passed, the weight of his years on the run was clear. Mon's case stood as proof that international conspiracies built on secrecy and intimidation could still be brought down. his empire never reached the heights he had planned. And in the end, the years spent in hiding only delayed the inevitable. Mon was jailed for 12 years, a term that reflected both the scale of the conspiracy and his determination to avoid capture for so long. What do you think about the cases and the sentences? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you found this breakdown informative, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications.